Welcome back to the Social Distance Podcast, everyone. It's been a long time coming, but worth the wait. We've got a special guest on today, Svein Tuft. He's joining us. We haven't had him on the show before, I don't think, but it was a good time to get him on. He's got a new book coming out called, what's it called, Svein? We
will never be here again.
Let me do it again. We don't want that. We don't want that going in there.
No, let it run it.
Let it run, mate.
You know the rules.
Absolutely.
You get one shot.
One shot.
Okay, one shot. We will never be here again. Sveino's launched it on Kickstarter a couple of weeks ago, so we're going to share the link below so you guys can all jump on there. And I think if you're not interested in buying his book at the start of this episode, just listen to the next hour of content, and I'm sure you'll be up to buying too. So enjoy the show with Sveino. It was great to have him on. Like, share, subscribe.
And the chat was so riveting that George joined the chat, and he's just finished the Vuelta. We didn't talk about it once.
Oh, yeah. No need.
Nice.
That's so fucking true.
Yeah. We went to do like race reviews. Sam just won Tour of Britain, where they won like every stage. We did the thing and went, yeah.
The good old days, mate. It's the good old days.
Do you know what? We can only talk about it retrospectively in 10 years. Fuck, remember that Vuelta? Yeah.
That's it.
The hard one? You mean the hot one? Oh, yeah,
the hot one. Yeah, and then the boys are cleaning up from Britain.
Let's just run the intro and wing it like we always do and see what comes out of it.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Front kick.
Just getting bored and dance move chat.
My radar's going pretty hard at the moment. I think we should.
Will you shut up, man?
That escalated quickly.
We're going to need to get some more qualified guests on the show, eh?
Been planning this episode for probably about a week, I reckon, and we were supposed to do it last Wednesday or something.
Thursday,
but we had to delay it by a few days because there was a lot of different reasons. But ultimately, Jones was just at his mate's house on the Cairns, so he was like,
"That was one reason."
Yeah,
George was late, so I can throw him under the bus. That threw it all out. It was ready to go.
Yeah.
And then George was late, and then he came back on, and then I used the whole. No, Sveino's busy as well, so it's not.
I think Sveino's got George's
Sveino's
frozen. He said it was cold outside, but I didn't think he'd freeze.
This does it a few times on this program.
Yeah,
like it works, and as soon as we play the intro or whatever, like it shits itself. Oh, he's back.
There he is.
You there? What's going on, mate?
Hey, fellas. I'm here. Sorry about that. We do run the Starlink Elon Musk setup out here in the mountains, so it's sometimes can just bail out on you every now and then, you know? No rhyme or reason.
I thought that was supposed to be the bee's knees, that one.
Sometimes, yeah. When the
ones.
satellites all line up, it's better than nothing. So that's kind of how we look at it.
So where in the world are you at the moment, Sveino?
I'm in Nelson, British Columbia, out in the Kootenays of a really nice mountain range, kind of out there a bit, you know, hard to get to. So people who live here really want to be here. It's quite a wicked part of the world.
It's strange. I always picture as like a real inner city, suburban, high-rise sort of guy.
Yeah. Well, you know, Andorra La Vella was always my place. And I always dreamed of moving downtown Barcelona just for the ruckus in the morning, you know, the whistling and the honking and the
more concrete, the better.
Yep. Yeah, like a concrete skyline.
Dog shit on the pavement.
Yeah. But obviously, you know, it's been a while since we've all been able to catch up and have a chat. It feels like more years have passed from the heyday of the Green Edge memories, the more you look back and you miss it. Like, I often reflect back at that Giro in 2014 and all those memories where you go, far out. It feels like a blur, man. Like, it feels like it was just gone.
Yeah, you know, I find myself saying this a lot, but in the moment, you never really realize you're in like the peak moments of your life, say in the sporting side of things, you know, like you'll have different moments and all that kind of stuff. But I think for a lot of us, Sam, I think you can really relate to this, is like in those really high moments, you just think it's going to keep going forever. Like it's hard to make that connection while you're in it. Like, oh yeah, this is a short window. I might only have like 2 more years of this kind of this feeling, or this like, this buildup of work and then results and things that happened in that time were really special. And they were like, but the nature of the sport is one that you're just like always looking forward and like looking down the road and never like just going like taking the time out and going, fuck, this is amazing, because Jonesy, like you said, that 2014 Giro was, yeah, I look back at it now. I still see your picture with all the numbers of the fallen, wounded soldiers on the back, and I just shake my head because it was such a crazy time in our lives, and at the time, because of the way the team was, the way like everyone was so fucking cool on that team, that was just kind of the norm for us, And now when you look back and I see cycling has changed in so many ways and for good and bad and all those things, I don't know if it's like if you could ever fuck around like that. Not that we were like taking things easy, but like it was just the way that team functioned, I thought was pretty special.
I guess in some ways it's human nature though, because even though you do something, cool on a specific stage or at a specific race, we're not morons to the fact that we don't understand that was like what we just did today, or what we did as a team today was pretty cool and pretty special. But then you go like, but we've got to kit up again tomorrow. Or you you just constantly like human nature, you're just constantly moving forward. Like, okay, I've done that. What's next? And then you go through. But then like when you're talking about professional sports, it's such a small, it's actually such a massive window of your life, because it's basically from like, essentially like at least and we'll get to it with you, Svein, when you started, when we start talking about your book, but like at least for me, it was when I left school until I was 35 years old. Like that's a massive part of your life where you change so much. You meet people, you get married, you have kids, you do like the bulk of the groundwork for the rest of your life in that period. So in some senses, cycling takes up a huge part of your life, but then at the same time it's only 15 years, and it's quite a bizarre it's a really short-lived career in so many ways, but it just happens to fall at the most pivotal point in some ways in your life. And you always get the question like, oh, what would you have done if you weren't a pro bike rider? People always ask me. I'm like, fucked if I know.
Same. Well, I think you hit on a really important thing. Like the nature of it is the fact that you have to just keep kidding up and going forward to the next day. And that's like, sure, I'm certain something you can attest to is just like when you stop, you realize, like I realize, man, I could have been doing so many other things, but the nature of like being immersed in it is like as soon as you start drifting to other things and thinking about alternative this and that and other ways, you're kind of leaving that all consuming thing. And I think like the way the sport works, and I guess some guys are different, they're wired differently or whatever, but I know for myself, I had to be all in. Had to be like my like I like to have a balance, but at the same time, my focus was on that thing, So yeah, it is. Yeah, it's just so hard to like you said. The other strange thing is it's that short period of time of your life, the kind of the key moments of your life as far as like work and all that kind of stuff. And so what's weird is in most jobs that you do in life that like you work really hard to get to a certain level. When you get to that level in other jobs, they don't just say, see you later when you get to like 38 or 35. And, and then you're kind of like, so what do I do now? And you have these life skills, but on paper, people are just like, so did you do the Tour de France? And if you haven't done the Tour de France, you're kind of like, well, what the heck? It's
you back?
Yeah, I'm back.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is crazy because like in professional sport, or at least in cycling, it's that period of your life where, like again going back to my example of I left school and went to Europe and started racing. That's when like my friends went to university. They fucked around for a year and a half, failed for the first year. Then they went back to uni and did made a 5-year course, a 4-year course, a 5-year course. But ultimately they left with a degree. Then they started a job in whatever field. Now they're all moved up in their companies, or they're owners of their companies or partners of their companies, and and their life just keeps kind of rolling in the same direction in some senses, where you either get promoted or you move up in a company, or you decide you don't like that company and you go to a different one. But like, it's still within the same field in a lot of ways. And okay, I'm working in the same field still in cycling, but like, it's still one of those careers that when you stop it, you're in your early adulthood or mid adulthood, and you're like, and you have to start again, you know.
Totally.
That's the real weird thing. Even though that 15 years has been successful in a lot of ways, and obviously we look back on it as the best time of our lives, but it's still a bizarre feeling.
Totally.
But you put a book out, Svein. That's ultimately why we got you on here, or it's coming out very soon, isn't it?
Yeah, the book is done. Yeah, we launched it with Kickstarter, and we're hoping to have it like the actual hard copy sent out around Christmas time. But yeah, it was a real process. Like it started like basically when I retired. A friend that I'd done some stuff with while I was still cycling, Richard Abraham, he reached out and just started getting the ball rolling, talking about, capturing all of these stories down on, because it was always part of just my, when I'd hang out with you guys and start telling these stories about my past prior to cycling. It was kind of the constant thing was, yeah, you need to write a book. And so there was
awesome
a big
stories.
there was a big chunk of my life prior to cycling where, yeah, it was not really straightforward. It wasn't the usual, the usual kind of lead up into cycling life. And so, yeah, there's just a bunch of stuff in there. And it was crazy because we started at first just doing, I was up in Andorra. It was kind of like COVID time. And I'd just be walking out in the forest doing like these big, long, I would start on a story on like a certain era of my life. And it was crazy because it would just evolve into this like hour-long thing, right? Because as soon as you open up that can of worms, it just keeps coming, right? And you realize that there's just so much in there. And it was really a really crazy experience to do it that phase right when I retired, because you kind of compartmentalize periods of life. And for this, like whatever last 15 years, I'd just been like a professional cyclist, just head down, like focusing on this thing. But when I was looking back at this whole other phase of my life, it was just crazy because I kept going like, how did I come to those conclusions? Or like, how the fuck did I end up here? You'd be sitting on the bus in the middle of like a Tour de France stage, and you're looking out at all these people, and you're surrounded by teammates and staff, and everyone's giving her, and like, man, like my life prior to those moments, like it was just so different. And I seriously, if you would have shown me that, like when I was, bumming around, ski touring or bike touring up in Alaska or these things, I would have just thought you were insane. Like there's no way I would have been doing that with my life later on, but that's just the crazy thing of life. And so, yeah, it was a really awesome experience to actually get to go through that whole kind of process of breaking down my life and like diving back into those stories, because it just opened up so many memories for me. And yeah, it was so, what's funny now is I read it now and I'm like, I still kind of shaking my head. So I'm like, I'm hoping that the reader gets that same feeling, because I lived it and I'm still like, what the fuck was I thinking,
But it'll be so sorry, Jonesy. It'll be so interesting to everybody, but to the general cycling fan who's read, Brad Wiggins' books. Okay, he had a little bit of a different upbringing, but he still followed a sort of a generic path in some senses to becoming a professional bike rider. Or, there's Geraint Thomas has got his books out, and Mitch has got a new book out now. But the difference in how you came to become a professional cyclist, and even I don't really know the story that well, but I do know about the adventures that you lived and the life that you lived to some surface level before you were a pro. But like for for someone who's interested in bike riding, it would be such a cool story to read, to be like, oh shit, he did all of that stuff before he was a pro bike rider. Because most people who become pro bike riders, maybe the extent of it is they did a university degree while they were racing amateur, or somebody from New Zealand or Australia went and raced in Belgium when they were 18 and they lived in a shitty little fucking barn and they got paid 150 euros a month and they lived on lentils. Okay, that's a rough ride, but it's actually not unique. It's actually pretty common. Whereas your story is so different to how you came around from ski touring in Alaska and doing all this stuff with your dog, getting chased by fucking bears and mountain lions and stuff, I'm sure, to all of a sudden like wearing the pink jersey at the Giro d'Italia, for example, or winning a medal at the World Champs in the time trial. And it's such a different, that's why I think cycling people will love it. But then obviously the other side of it is just a look into the way people can live their lives, and everybody can, to some degree, find a little bit of Sveino in them, but we'll never ever get to the extent of how you live, because it's, for lack of a better word, extreme to a lot of people. But there's still lots of little different lessons and ways we can look at life and go, oh fuck, actually that's not that bad. I probably don't need to lose my shit about that so much, So it sort of comes in from both angles and will appeal to different audiences. Not that I've read it. But.
No, I think that is the hope, and it's something that when I talk to young riders now, like it's always this thing of they have to make it by this age or else they're just useless. And I know the sport has changed. I know things are different, but my thing still is if you have it, teams will sign you. If you can win bike races, people will still sign you. My first bike race wasn't until I was 25. And I think that part of what helped me to like go through the sport quickly to actually get to a level where I could get to like a world tour level was the fact that I had this other life before. I looked at things differently, and I've probably told you guys about this, but like, one of my first pro teams, Garmin Slipstream, I remember being on the team had like two really nice buses, but one was considered like the shit bus. And I remember sitting there with riders, like, and they're looking around, and, we'd get picked up at the airport and we're on the shit bus, And I remember just like listening to that going like, fuck, like these guys don't know how to have it, and I remember being down in like South America doing these janky races, and you're just getting changed out in the middle of a parking lot, and there's people all around you, and you just gotta like, it's just, when you come from a different perspective, it's so much easier to enjoy these things that we had in the world tour and at that level of bike racing, right? It was just, so a different perspective helps you kind of bypass a lot of the stuff. And I think that life is so much about your perspective of things rather than, trying to follow this exact template for making it as a pro. It's like, how are you going to go about it? How are you going to do it differently? How do you see things? So the book is a lot about my perspective in that way.
I think one of the big key elements to your career, Sveino, is what you brought to a team, not just as a rider, like the level-headedness and the fact that you were different. The amount of times people would feel like in really tough moments, that voice of reason or just that different perspective, that calming influence. And that's why you look at someone like a Durbo who would always request to room with you because you had that click, and he could try and adapt that mentality, which it's one of those things you can't teach it, but people over time can learn how Sveino would handle situations because of that life experience. And I think, and this is a good perspective for you, Bills, is there a big shift in teams now when they do sign riders? It is not so much about the data anymore. Like I was talking to a DS the other day, and they were saying that all it can take is one or two bad eggs on a bus that might be good riders, but they don't have that click. And I think, you look at what Sveino brought to the team, that stuff that is, you can't find it on paper,
Yeah, I think like I'd like to say that was the case, but I don't think so. Yeah, I think still it's maybe even more so now. The thing that people look at when signing bike riders is how fucking fast can they go uphill.
Yeah.
That's what they look at. And of course, the good teams, and our team does it. They do take a bit of a deep dive into who is this person. Let's speak to some riders in the team that might know him, or other staff members that have a relationship with him. And who is the guy? Is he a good guy? Is he a bad egg? What does he bring to the table in terms of atmosphere and trying to create a good culture? That does happen. But I still think in a lot of teams, if it's going to be the next Pogacar and he's a complete fuckwit, they'll probably sign him. Well, they'll definitely sign him.
Yeah. I think you're right, Sam, and I think that's something that teams will just tend to worry about later and find out about. Unfortunately, it's just the way that it is, right? Like they're just looking for the next best thing, and they're just hoping that. Because I think from an administration side of things, like the people who make those calls at the end, they don't have to be on the road with those guys, right?
Yeah.
And we knew how important that was, Jonesy, like just having someone who could add to the culture. Like you being on the bus was an addition for all of us riders. Once we got to know you and like you, it was something that gave value to our day because you weren't caught up in the race, even though that was kind of your job to like pay attention to the race and like have good questions. You like at the end of a shitty Giro stage, we were able to like hang out at the back of the bus and talk about other things in life. You were able to read the room and be like, oh, these guys are fucked. They don't want to talk about anything to do with the day,
Yeah.
And you could have a good chat. And I think there's something about that whole side of things when it comes to culture that is just so priceless. And unfortunately, I think like a lot of teams, they're just scrambling from year to year to try and find the next best super talent, the next big thing. And they're not looking at that big picture. And, I always say like, when I would talk about the Green Edge days, again, that's the team I know best. So I'm going to keep bringing it back to that. Is one of the things I find myself saying is that, on paper, we never really had any crazy talents. If you look at like the whole, if we looked at a quick step lineup for a team time trial or another team for like a monument, yeah, we had a guy like Garrow who could seal the deal, but you have to have a team that was like fucking 100% behind that goal. And so, yeah, on paper, amazing, just super teams, but we pulled off some amazing shit, and it was because of looking at that other angle of the culture, right?
And the hardest thing I found at the back of the bus with you is when you tell these amazing stories, and my brain going, that should just be a moment between you and I, but it's so good. Do you mind if I fire up the camera? And there'd be this instant look at your face going, yeah, I get it. It's your job. But yeah, and I could read faces and reactions, but that was the thing that pissed me off the most is there was very limited times for me where there'd be a great moment and you go, well, I need to recreate that because angles today I got nothing, I'd wing that all the time. And one of the
Well, I was just gonna say, like, that's kind of one of those things is some people are really good at that. They love the thing. But for me, that was a special moment we had between us.
Yeah.
And then to try and recreate that, I hate recreating things because I think you always just get robbed of what you think it's going to be. The magic was done, and that's what being a human is, right? The magic is done, and then you move on and recreate something else or do something else. But
the big thing we used to trade was films. I remember on the hard drives. There's always docos. Really,
well, you had the films and the ability to get them. I just talked about mostly I was poaching off of you.
Yeah, you go around rooms and you just trade them. You just go, what do you need, mate? I've got a doco on dolphins here. Got what was that other one? The whistleblower one.
The thing that like Green Edge is a completely different team now. But the Green Edge that we know that we were in, like, there's no doubt that they nailed it in terms of creating a culture, for quite a long period of time as well. And I think like there's no doubt that it had a massive positive impact on results. Of course, we had some good riders like Gero, and then the Yates boys came in and stuff like that. But they also fit the culture, and which was hugely important, because whenever you had to ride for, like, for example, the 2018 Giro, Svein, when you and I were just slogging away in the front for 2 weeks or whatever it was, getting asked to do some like ridiculous shit sometimes. like half the time, if it wasn't like Whitey who was asking us to do that, who was massively pivotal and part of the culture as well, and we weren't riding for Simon, we probably would have just been like, what the fuck are they thinking? But but because of the culture that the team had, we were like, all right, let's give it a crack. Maybe we'll fail, but if we fail, we'll still get pat on the back when we get on the bus, and we'll be all good, and we'll try again tomorrow. And
dude, we were all in, man. I remember those days, like crazy,
all in. And like a big part of the culture, I think, was that there was so many different characters, with the exception of a few guys that came to the team that everyone kind of like, oh, this guy's a bit of a dick. But ultimately, like, even though we had different characters, everybody accepted different characters, and that's why we got on so well. Like Svein was obviously a really different character to I don't know, to most of us in a lot of senses, but we really loved what Svein did, and we knew that we weren't going to be Sveino, but we really enjoyed snippets of what he used to do, and we used to aspire and be inspired and look up to you for those things. And then you had guys like Magnus Cort Nielsen, who used to always just wear jeans. Like he'd finish a stage in the Grand Tour and put jeans on, and you could easily just be like, what the fuck are you doing, Maggie? But it just became a joke. We just accepted Maggie just wore jeans, and that became a thing as well. And we're all different characters, and we all accepted who we were. And that's why the team gelled so well for such a long period of time. And we're trying to do that now in Israel Premier Tech as well. And I think we're doing it very well, like understanding different characters, and it's a professional environment, and the team is growing with the sport and becoming more and more professional and looking into the finer details more and more and understanding the importance of those things. But at the end of the day, the majority of the riders can go and sit at dinner together and have a laugh and talk shit about other things, even though they might have bickered about something earlier in the day in the race or whatever it might be. But that you can do that when you have a strong culture, and that's why you can be successful day in, day out.
Yeah, I think such an important thing what you said with that is, like, when you see a guy is all in for real, and we can talk about it, we can sit there and make the race plan, we can do all this shit as a team, but until everyone sees it out on the road, then you're in. We're good. And that bond has been made, and it's like, it's so powerful. It's like you said, the guy can just be totally different world than you, but it's like a brother, right? Because you've seen what he's willing to do out on the road for his brothers, right? And I think what's scary for teams to like kind of build their whole focus on culture is that it's risky, right? You're going to sign a bunch of guys that are based on who they are, like as far as people and how they get along in a group and all those things, rather than talent. And talent's just like you said, Sam, you can't deny if a guy is going up a climb at 7 watts per kilo or 6.5 watts per kilo nowadays, it's just like, well, that's who we got to hire. And he can be a complete asshole. But if he wins bike races, that's unfortunately what teams are trying to do. And I just think, I think hats off to Green Edge in those days, because they needed to hire guys, but the big emphasis was on who they were as people and how they would fit into the group. And that's risky. And I think guys like Whitey were really instrumental in that, like really had a knack for that. I think that's probably one of his real skills in life is getting a read on people and how they would mesh in a group. Right.
And like you can still, thankfully, in cycling, professional cycling, or in our circles of life, you come across some dickheads, but you don't necessarily come across some like terminal assholes. You don't come across that people who are such assholes that you can't be around them. It's quite rare, because ultimately we all share something in common, and it's riding a bike. And we all, at some point, we share we've all had a crash. We've all, been successful in a race. We've all had hard times. We've all had good times. So there's some common ground. So like, if you have a strong core or a strong base of culture, people can come and go, and you can still retain that culture. Just because you have like, this is the culture of this team, this is the identity of this team. It doesn't matter who's in it or who's not in it. Come into it, you have to abide by the identity of this team, you know. And it's harder for some people, and some people are a bit slower to get on board. But ultimately, unless you're a really bad egg, you succumb to the fact that, hey, this is how this team operates, and I have to be part of that, no matter how good you are or how shit you are. So you can still do it with people who don't necessarily, you know, aren't molded that way naturally. And we did it in Green Edge with some riders.
Totally. And I think that's actually a beautiful thing, because you're helping that person grow as a human, right? It's not just about writing people off right away. You need to give people a chance to actually figure out how things work. And I think that's another important point you said there with riders coming up. Anyone who's made it to the World Tour level has been in organizations and has had to work with people. So it's nearly impossible that they're just a complete fuckwit, because you're going to have those lessons taught to you at some point. Even if you're just a super, super talent, people are going to hopefully take you aside at some point, because we're not always just like winning and the best and just the greatest. It's like you're going to have shitty moments in that career. And those are the growing points. I think those are the important points that we had to go through and grow as men. And I think like being part of an organization where you actually feel like stoked to be a part of it and an integral piece of it, well, that's one of the best. That's being a human, right? If you go back to tribal times, like having a cause or a reason within the group that you gave something valuable, like that's our worth as humans, I think. And to not be able to like enjoy that or buy into that is, I think it's going to be a rough go as a human. It's going to be tough, you know.
Oh, you'll always everyone will come up against someone at some point in life that says, pull your head in, or they give you a smack in the face, or, you know, it's no one's immune from that.
Absolutely.
Swano's quote from All for One, when he said, we come from tribal people and we're all striving to be part of a group that does something special. That was a quote that was used by Nathan Buckley at the start of the 2018 season in the AFL for Aussie listeners. And then they went on this journey and made the grand final that year, almost won it. So grand final week, I've reached out to Swano and said, oh, mate, they want to do a 2-page spread in the biggest selling newspaper in Australia, all about Swano's quote in the film and how it turned around the culture of the club. But what I wanted to ask you, Swano, is obviously the name of the book is We Will Never Be Here Again, and we'll post in our socials a link to the Kickstarter program. I see you've already raised 40 grand. I think your target was 30. So, and it's got like a stamp saying a project we love from Kickstarter. So once you get that official stamp, mate, I think they bump it up in the search listing. So you're well on your way. But one of the most common things people ask is, you know, what is the purpose of the book? You mentioned before that if people can, you know, understand, holy shit, like, you know, how amazing the journey is, but there's obviously something, or is there a specific moment that you think that was a turning point or a sliding doors? I remember you were saying the bike shop where you rode a road bike for the first time, and the guy came back, he's like, the fuck? Looked at your watts or whatever. Looking back at your journey, is there a moment where you go, if that did not happen, we wouldn't be having this conversation on the potty now?
Yeah, you know, that's a good point. That story, I'd been touring. I'd ridden up to Alaska 2 times, and I was working at a kind of sports store, like a secondhand sports store. And sorry, my dog's harassing me here.
Yeah, mate.
Yeah, I'd been touring with the dog and a bike trailer up to Alaska a couple of times, just living life on the road. And I was like, I had no idea what bike racing was or care for any kind of competition. Didn't interest me at all. Like, if I saw the Tour de France on TV, I just thought, oh, that looks ridiculous. You know, like, what are they doing? What's with those outfits? You know, I didn't have much respect for 10 speeds. You know, it's just the whole thing was not cool in my books. And yeah, so I was working at this secondhand sports store, but a big emphasis on bikes. And I'd like, with all my crappy bike setups, I'd learned how to build and rebuild bikes. Like, I'd had to do it many times on the side of the road. So here I was in a shop. I could kind of fix all these crappy bikes coming in, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, my friend had a Cannondale road bike with Spinergy wheels. And I was just like, what is this thing? And he's just like, yeah, you should try it. And, it just looked foreign. It looked like an alien thing to me. It had aero bars, like some profile aero bars on it, because he's like triathlon guy. And I was just like, the pedals, the clip-in pedals, all this stuff. It just looks so ridiculous to me. But I was like, I'll give it a go. One of those days I was just kind of bored, slapped on the shoes, and I was heading down the Langley bypass, which is like a super busy road. And you're just like, I couldn't believe the power transfer and the speed. Like at this, like up to this point, fellas, I'd been on a mountain bike with a big trailer loaded down with like tons of gear, a friggin' 80-pound dog. You could ride like 300 watts and you'd still be doing like 18K an hour. And so like that same power transfer, I'm like ripping along this highway at like 45K an hour. And I'm just shaking my head like, what the hell is this? I felt like I was on some kind of spacecraft. And that was it. That hooked me. And it was crazy because, like I dropped out of high school in grade 10 and I pissed off and I was mountain climbing. My parents thought I was totally nuts, like I would go build mountain setups up in middle of nowhere and spend all winter just backcountry skiing and snowboarding, and I'd disappear for like months at a time. That's what my parents became accustomed to. I'd go do these trips up to Alaska, and I remember those were the days you'd buy like a calling card, and I'd call like maybe once a month, go to some janky phone booth in fucking Skagway, Alaska. Hey mom, yeah, I'm up here. And like there was just, I think of like the connectivity we have now. I could sit here on a device and be filming where I am and talk to someone every day for an hour. But it was just very much a different time. So yeah, I was very much like my parents thought I was nuts. And this was a moment my dad started hanging out with me a lot more. We started like kind of, teenage years are really weird. They're kind of, I think they're strange for everyone. And I was very much like a hard-headed, stubborn guy. And so I wasn't super close with my dad during that kind of period. My parents separated at the age of, so I was kind of just like, I wasn't a fan of the whole operation, And yeah, he started hanging out, and my dad's Norwegian, and we started talking about like bike racing. My grandpa bike raced in Norway back in the day, and he always loved like European sports. And so he was kind of like planting the seed a bit, because now it's like I'd ridden this super fast bike and I was already starting to think like, oh, I could really do something with this, I didn't know what the fuck it was, but it was just like, it just felt amazing to like go this fast, Anyways, we started building up a really janky road bike from mix and match pieces from this shop. And it was just like a Frankenstein bike, and decided, why don't we just go and enter in some races, some local races, see what happens. And then that was it. As soon as, so like I would either enter the race and my bike would just detonate. I'd like blow a chain, like the drivetrain would blow apart, the wheels would break or whatever, or I'd win by 10 minutes. It was like one of the two options. As much as I wasn't like a competition guy, like got to win and feel the taste of winning and all this stuff, it was like, I think when you win something or start doing well at something, it becomes quite addictive, right?
Yeah.
And I think like those first few experiences where I won a couple bike races, that was it for me. I just like, yeah, it was the personal kind of challenge for yourself to like progress and get better, but also that little taste of winning was kind of sweet. And
but didn't you struggle with tactics in those early days? Because
absolutely.
Was it your tactic? Just fucking go.
Yeah,
like when the gun goes off, just go.
Yeah. So if the course suited that, like where like my watts could just kind of drop people by riding like an idiot, But if it was not, like, there were still some good riders in those like certain categories, you know, and they would just be riding on my wheel, and I'd just be like, what's with these guys? They're just like, they're not doing any work with me, you know. But I would never like try and force them to work. I was just like, well, I'm just going to ride them off the wheel, like somehow on the flats into a headwind, you know. That was just, yeah, I didn't understand. I just figured you had to just ride your nuts off, and because it worked in other races, right? So I couldn't put those things together. Obviously, that was like the very first few races, you know. But yeah, it was funny because I just didn't have any kind of background knowledge or people until a certain point. Then I had people kind of step in, and they saw this kind of big dumb kid who rode like an idiot, and they're like, oh, this guy could probably use some help with tactics, you know. And then I started learning all those things, and then yeah, it just happened really quickly from that point on, right? Because I was able to put it together. And
Did you wear Lycra from the start, or did you rock the boardies?
Yeah, for the first few, I had a pretty ragtag operation, you know. In my day, it's so funny because I look at all the stuff we have now, and you know, people who ride around here, they're always talking about temperatures and conditions and what they're going to wear for this and that. It used to drive me nuts on the bus, like just the guys talking about all the different stuff they need to wear and asking questions.
Still
like,
happens.
fuck, man. I'm just like, because when I used to train back in the day, I had a policy where it's like you had to go for like 6 hours, and where I lived, like in the winter, it was it's like a rainforest, you know. So you'd have that kind of 6-8 degrees and just pissing rain all day, and all I had was shorts and a jersey. So in those days, I would just like my policy is you just had to ride harder when you started getting really cold. And I look back now and I'm just like, that is so fucked. Like, I would never do that now. But you know, when you're 24, 25, whatever, like, I don't know, you just have like this resilience that, yeah, you can do it now, but it's just like, do you like to suffer as much now? Is I guess the question.
Would you be up for giving advice
George is sitting
to
backstage.
someone? Yeah, I was going to say,
George
could
is
you
sitting
give advice
backstage.
to George?
We didn't want to bring him in because we were just so ingrained in the story.
Yeah, I've been really enjoying just listening to this. Actually, how good's backstage? I could just do this all the time. Sit backstage and just listen
This
to ancient
would be
people
your
talk.
dream, mate. You would do the podcast every week. You didn't have to come on it. You could just watch it from behind. But he commented before we bring him in now because he wrote, George wrote in the comments while he was sitting backstage that Svein would have won Flesh this year because it was so fucking cold.
Yeah, there's just one problem of those nasty bergs, though, George. Hey, you got to remember.
Yeah, but I know it's interesting, like just listening to, like, focusing on that, because I know you do like a lot of cold stuff, and I don't know what you guys chatted about this in the start of the set, but like there is this element of like toughness, which, like, I'm sure it's a contributor, but at some point there's got to be some physics involved. I mean, I like to think that, like, oh, tough, do saunas, you know, like personally, but then I go out in the cold and I just crumble. And then I see, I think it's also your wife who does a lot of cold immersion stuff.
Yeah.
And it's clearly trainable.
It is, yeah. It helps to have 10% more body fat than you do, George. I think
it doesn't. Yeah, that doesn't help me. But like, it's just so wild to think that, like, you can. Okay, obviously there's volume and surface area and there's heat dissipation and all this stuff, but at some point, it's just fucking get stuck in and sit in a cold bath and deal with it. Yeah,
I mean, I still do think that like there's a big difference in our physiology. Like you're probably a guy who cools very well just naturally, and then you're just super lean. And on top of that, I don't want to speak out of terms, but you probably don't have a huge amount of muscle mass, right? So all those factors kind of contribute to like handling cold much better. But you're right, it is trainable. I don't know if you like we're coming to the end of our summer here, and the days, like, it went from like 35 degrees, like proper heat, and it's switched in like a week to like right now I'm sitting in, it's like 6 degrees outside. And it's crazy because your body spent all this summer like adapting to the heat, right? And I know you guys do like so much with the heat nowadays. So you get accustomed to just that efficiency of cooling. And so it's a really hard transition to go all the other way again into winter. And so what I will say is, like, one of the things I noticed, like, initially is just like your hands are useless. Like, your capillaries in your hands have kind of shut down because they don't need to cool. Like, they don't need to actually warm in those zones, like your extremities, right? And so it takes a while. And then, in a month or two, I'll be able to work outside in -20 with like no gloves or whatever. Like, you just adapt, is what I'm saying. But it's like, the problem is, I think, is that in current society is that everyone's so afraid to have discomfort for a short period of a time to allow for the adaptation to occur. And my thing has always been like, we come from like very strong stock, the people that like before us, our grandparents and our great grandparents, like they were, I think, much more resilient than us. I think nowadays we switch on to 21 degrees and we just try and keep everything way too comfortable. And I'm not going to lie, that's nice. It's nice to have a house that's warm and everyone's kids are happy, got all the food and whatever. But I don't think life was always like that. And I think that we have this crazy durability, resilience in us that came from hard times. And I think to deny that is, I personally believe, a big reason why we have a lot of like mental issues nowadays, like because people aren't testing those things and life is too easy and we have too many choices. And I think that that's not helping our current situation, because life was full of a lot of difficulties. And like I said, I don't want difficulties all the time, But I think
is this why, like, I mean, I massively agree with this theory, but is this why, like, this whole movement of, let's say like ice baths or saunas or whatever, there's something that's like giving this huge endorphin response because you survived the lion attack, or you know what I mean? It's like you've got this, you put your body on edge. But I also wonder, when you take it to our example, it's like, I think this is absolutely, like, for the normal population, you've got to do something hard each day. You've got to go like shock the system where you at least like activate.
For a lot of people,
of
that's
stress.
just not wearing a jersey outside.
Yeah.
For like a lot of people, that's almost enough. For people
But do you think
real
for like,
internalized.
Yeah, exactly. But do you think for like us, like, I've just come back from a filthy interval session, and I'm fucked. I'm pinned, and then I'm like, I kind of feel this.
One
like,
day you'll come on the show and say you're fresh. You feel good.
Yeah.
I don't know when, but.
But I feel like I've survived the lion attack. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like right now.
Yeah.
And I think there's some. I wonder if you can go too much the other way, where you go, okay, like another
Absolutely.
huge cortisol response now. And if I did a cold immersion, but I've already just done 4.5 hours of efforts, and I wonder if, because cycling is, we have this huge thing to be like more. Ice baths, awesome.
Yeah.
Saunas, awesome. Training, awesome. And then at the end of the day, you just explode.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, like I think that's also a big issue. Is like, just like you said, cyclists is just more. If this worked, then why wouldn't I do it like 10 times more? And you're exactly right, George. Like, the effort that it takes to do what you're already doing out in the cold, like when you're having to do like those hard yards in January, and it's just like that 5-6 degrees all day, man, you don't need any more cold adaptation. Right? Like, it's like, if anything, that's when you really need to take care of yourself. So I think it's all in context. People look at maybe back in the day, what I was doing was too extreme, but that was like, I was doing that in the winter, and I was really trying to space it between a lot of like the harder stuff that I was doing on the bike. It was more experimental for me. I wasn't trying to do anything. And I look at now, like on social media, it's just everyone's like ice bathing and all this stuff. And it's great. But I actually do think it can be very detrimental as well, in the sense of just what you said, the cortisol release. So all those adrenaline hormones mixed with a stressful life and not addressing a million other things like sleep and lifestyle habits and nutrition. And man, if your system's out of whack, and then you're adding that and feeling like you have to, because it's going to make you feel, I don't know, all the things that they say on social media, which is like, it's like a million things. You're just going to be ripped, jacked, shredded, just so like, like all these bullshit things. And it's like, no, it's not going to do any of that. If you enjoy it, if you like like for me, I like the mental approach. It's a sucky thing to go and do. Like I look at our river sometimes in December. My wife was really keen on it. She still is. But again, she kind of spaces it out and does it as a thing. And I'd go with her some mornings, and I love that shit. And here my wife is doing it, and I'm kind of going like, oh, fuck, is this what we're doing? Like the fucking river is like, there's just icicles hanging over off the trees into the river. It's like we're walking in snow and you're stripping down butt naked to crawl into this river. And it's minus 15 out. And you're just like, okay, this is what we're doing this morning. Okay, this is, yeah. So like, but it's that mental thing, right? So what I will say is probably why people get such a excitement out of it is when you're done, you're pretty fucking stoked about what you just did. And for a lot of people, that is a big thing. Because there is just no challenges anymore. You go to work and you get your groceries are just easy to get. They're at a place where it's just like you can get whatever the hell you want. You can get a papaya in January up in fucking Yukon. That's not that's not right.
You really could only do that river dip with your wife because the shrinkage would be off the charts, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah, exactly right. Yeah, I would not do that in any other situation.
But also what you're saying is that you can't go and have like a 6-week bender, come home, leave your wife, and then jump in an ice bath and fix everything, no?
No. And that's what I feel like being sold. That's what I feel like being sold on Instagram. Yeah.
But you must get a lot of people, Swano, that are always asking you for quick fix tips. Give me just something real quick from your journey that you can give to me. I'll do it for a couple of weeks and it's going to solve everything because I want to be like you and let's go.
Well, that's just humans right now, especially.
Do you know what the whole thing is? It's like, you've heard the expression, the mountain is the way. You know what I mean? Like the hardest thing is the cure in a way. Like people are looking for the cure. Like I just want to do something that's going to make me better. But the thing that makes you better is by doing the really hard thing, and it's not the outcome. It's just the process of doing something really hard improves your entire life.
100%.
It's suffering. At the end of the day, it's fucking suffering. You got to suffer.
So that is, it's such a great point, Joey. Like I do talk to a lot of people, and that's just it. They're looking for the quick way to like doing something, whatever it is, and you're just like. I find so many times I'm saying, well, like, no, it's really unsexy. It's really boring, but it's just hard work and consistency and discipline. Those things all suck. And it's not what the world is selling people right now. The world's selling them a quick drink thing to like, give them focus. Another thing to like, that's going to get them shredded in 2 weeks. It's just this constant distraction and none of it works. If you're not wired to do the discipline and the work, it's just like, what the fuck are we talking about? None of it's going.
Do you think
anywhere.
you are wired? Like one thing I actually am curious about. Like, do you think that you are wired? You're predisposed to some kind of like adventure thing, or do you, like for example, I think I like the suffering, whatever. I like doing all this stuff. I like intervals, and it's probably to some point an addiction. Like I struggle when I take like 3 weeks off the bike. It's hard for me. I've got Sam in my ear going, mate, you got to fucking do nothing. You got to recover. You got to recover.
Yeah.
But I don't have this sense of like, oh, training camp is in 1,000 away. I'm going to ride there. I don't have that sense of adventure, which I wonder if that's like some people do. I look at even where people train. I go down and do efforts, and some people go, I'm going to go and do this gravel road that's fucking a goat track through here. Like, do you think that adventure do you think that that's a learned thing, or do you think that that's just like, you've just got this sense, or is it even like, I'm fucking running from something. You know what I mean? Like, is it like,
yeah, it's a little bit of all those things. I was super lucky. Like my dad always had us going on adventures as kids, like from a very young age. And so again, going back to that perspective thing, like my dad, like I look at, like I have 2 kids. When we go somewhere with them, it's fucking snacks and drink boxes and everything under the rainbow to keep them content, because you're so worried they're going to have a blowout,
Yeah.
And my dad would just like throw my brother and I in the truck when we were just little. And he'd just be like, yeah, we're going hiking for the day. No one knew where the fuck we were going. He didn't bring any food. And you would just like go like for like a 20K hike up some mountain. And there was no complaining. You just shut your mouth. That was just how it is. And I think of like now, if I took my son, like it would just be, yeah, it was a different time. And so I was kind of instilled with that. That was kind of my norm and what I became accustomed to. And it was always an important part of just what you did. But then, you know, going back to like that running from things, yeah, like, man, I never thought this, but like I'm doing bike packing races now, like these kind of ultra ridiculous like races through the mountains, just because like I find it fascinating, like the shit that goes on with like sleep deprivation and all these other things. So like, yeah, I must be running from something. Like I'm still chasing the dragon in some way, right? And I think that when something's kind of in you like that, it's hard to shake it. Like, and you need to kind of address it every now and then. And so that thing is kind of feeding that for me. Or these adventures, I feel like when I do them, I come back for me just as a better version of myself, because I kind of let go of like that angst, because it's something
almost
I've done
like I remember in Agus's book, they talk about like the dragon and just like taming the dragon. You know, you've got to like, you've just got to fucking whip it into submission.
Great book. Yeah.
And then you know, the only way is to like just fucking go to war with the demons and like a 24-hour, flog yourself, come back, and you're too fucked to worry about anything else.
Starlink.
Oh, Elon.
He's still thinking about a response. Stumped him.
Sorry, boys. I'm gonna write Elon after this podcast and
no, you're right, mate.
Get
you'll find him on Twitter.
British Columbia here.
I think that your story has got bloody Hollywood script written all over it, particularly with like the journey.
Speaking my language, Jonesy. That's
I could just see Sveino in LA there. Just
who would play Sveino? You know that
Brad Pitt, obviously.
Analogy. Yeah, Brad Pitt. Jason Statham. He's got the right sort of beard complexion.
Good accent. Yep.
I reckon instead of the movie, let's just everyone who's listening to this episode, and I know there's been a few people hanging out for a show. When I was at Tour of Britain last week, I was actually, you know, it makes me smile with the amount of people that came up to me and said, "Hey, when's the next show? I love the pod." So we really appreciate that. So all of you people and everyone else listening to it, we'll add the link to Sveino's Kickstarter for his book, We Will Never Be Here Again. And instead of hanging around and waiting for the Hollywood movie that Jonesy's going to produce with Jason Statham based on Sveino's life, just get yourself a hold of one of the copies of this book. I mean, you've had a pretty good insight on this show about how Sveino sees the world and his different perspectives, which has always inspired a lot of us, especially me in the team. So I think if you guys get behind the book, you'll feel the same.
Right on.
Well, do you still keep in touch with a lot of the guys from the early days, like the guy you're talking about who had the second-hand sports shop? After winning a stage of the Tour de France with the team time trial, did you go back there?
But you know, like that's like, it's crazy how life drifts. You know, like that's 20. What are we talking now? That was the 90s. That was the late 90s. So that's like over 25 years plus. So yeah, I do, but it's like you kind of drift. It's not like you're day to day having a chat about the good old days at the sports shop,
That's right.
I love the good old day chats though. Like I think I've got so much time I could literally sit around and just hear people talk about good old days.
Oh yeah.
Like we should do a segment on the show, good old days, and every time we get a pro on and it's just a good old days chat from
it's a great idea.
Why don't we just change? It's sort of the theme of the show anyway. Why don't we just change the name of the show to the good old days?
Yeah, exactly. Like social
podcast and fuck
the good old days.
The good old days.
Who wants to? They weren't the good old days. No one wants to keep the.
Yeah, they were shit house. Let's go to the good old days.
Well, and they're just so embellished and so like altered over time. Pre kind of real internet days, right? You can
actually
kind of go off.
Do you know the Italian guy that goes around all the races selling the old jerseys? So he sells or he might be free. He's at the Vuelta, he's at the Tour, and he sets up his little stand.
I know the types.
And and it's always like La Vie Claire, the Peugeot, and we're parked up there the other day, and I'm looking out the window, and he's selling old jerseys, and I look out the window and I went, fuck me, I rode for that team. It was like the Radio Shack. That's an old retro jersey. I fucking rode for that.
The red and
that
yellow.
That was the good old days.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's when you know you're old, eh?
Oh, mate.
Yeah, you've been at it for a while now, George. Jeez,
yeah, mate.
I remember the first time I saw you on Radio Shack. You were just a real skinny guy. And
with small man syndrome.
I think it was
nothing's changed.
Terreno Adriatico. Yeah.
Yeah, it could have been Terreno. Yeah, it was probably Paris even back then. I can't remember, but
could be Paris as well. Yeah. Anyways, that's probably 2010 or something like that. So what is
2011 was when I first started racing with Radio Shack. 11.
Yeah,
so that's many moons ago.
It's good
old days.
Yeah, good old days.
We better let Swaino get to his daily duties, mate. What do you got planned?
See the shovel behind him. What are you digging today?
Today I got it's a snow shovel. There's no snow here. I got a bunch on the go today, fellas. Yeah, working on the cabin. Have a group coming and to do a bunch of gravel riding this weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So yeah, just kind of prepping and working on things, because when I go, I've been away a bit, or just been busy kind of doing other things lately. So then work builds up, and looking after the kids, and then I take them up the mountain. We're going to do some trail clearing. I got to cut in my ski touring route because the alders are all growing over. In the early season, they just get fucking turns it into alder jail. So yeah, bit of work up there. Yeah, mixed bag, fellas.
Good stuff, mate.
That sounds like the dream day. Enjoy it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
Great day.
I'm gonna jump online and order my shopping and turn the heater up and just chill out.
Perfect.
And complain. Yeah. Good
Hey,
to
Svein,
see you,
thanks for coming
Sveino.
on, mate. It was
Great to see you guys too. Yeah, thanks for having me.
and thanks for the insight and perspective into your life, and I look forward to reading the
And
book.
we'll get that link up and make sure everyone out there get on board on that. I think you'll absolutely love it.
Thanks, everyone.
If you don't get at least 10,000 donations,
That's what I'm hoping for. Yeah,
from the
that'd be
show,
awesome.
we're gonna end we'll end the show.
That's it.
Yeah.
And rebrand it. We'll be
10
back.
thou, 10K minimum.
Good old days.
Sweet.
That's it.
Good stuff, mate.
All right, guys.
Cheers, mate.
So yeah.